Hello and welcome to CATSweek. I'm Annalise Poorman. On March 24th at the Bloomington Board of Zoning Appeals meeting, Development Services Manager Jackie Scanlon shared a petitioner's request for a variance from tree preservation standards.
Our first petition tonight, V-0522, is a request for a variance from tree preservation standards. The property is located at 4500 East 3rd Street. Some of you have seen this in different, for different petition requests. It is located at 3rd and 446. You can see it outlined here in red. The petitioner received major site plan approval under SP 1821, and they are planning to do a 176-unit multifamily development. They were also showing self-storage on the back of the property when they originally went to Plan Commission. They are planning to potentially phase that and not build that with phase one. That will change slightly some of their landscaping requirements, but other than that, it's fine for them to do that. When the site plan went through Plan Commission, they were showing a connection from 3rd Street through the property to 446, out onto 446, exiting on the east side of the property.
Scanlon said that the property has approximately 44,000 square feet of tree canopy, which is required under the Urban Development Ordinance.
There is approximately 44,000 square feet of tree canopy, which is a little bit less than 10% of the property total. And the UDO requires that 90% of those existing trees be preserved, which only allows for about 4,400 square feet of disturbance allowed.
The petitioner worked with Bloomington Transit to add bus stops throughout the site, which Scanlon said would be beneficial to the city. However, in doing so, they would need to remove more trees than the current code would allow. As a compromise, the petitioner proposed a 2-to-1 mitigation plan to offset the tree removal.
They have proposed, submitted a proposal of a 2-to-1 mitigation plan to offset the requested variance to plant an additional 11,432 square foot area of trees on the site. So basically what we have seen work well in the past is that if tree preservation areas need to be disturbed, if there is extra room on the site, and obviously this site is quite large, slightly over 10.5 acres, then a mitigation plan can be submitted and reviewed by the department to help bring about those missing trees, double the amount, and other locations on the site.
Scanlon said that the department recommends approving the tree preservation variance. The board approved the request unanimously. At the Bloomington City Council meeting on March 23rd, the council heard a resolution to establish the Johnson Creamery building as a historic district. Director of the Bloomington Hand Department, John Zodi, said he has concerns about the stability of the Johnson Creamery site.
Obviously, we have an important situation going on with the Johnson's Creamery smokestack with the safety issue. The city of Bloomington issued an unsafe order on the structure in January and then reissued an order on March 11th after we received an updated structural engineering assessment done by the owner, which is Peerless Development, who I believe may be on tonight as well, and their attorney is present. So there is a sense of urgency here. I do want to be respectful of the process, and I hope I've conveyed that in conversations with you all. The new information, the decision that would be before the council, as you know, is whether to designate the Creamery property as a historic district. The HPC, the Historic Preservation Commission, recommended a map to you that was submitted in your original packet materials. Earlier this week, the property owner expressed, well, last week, and then we sent to the council office early this week, a revised map at the request of the property owner that would have narrowed the scope of that.
The council also voted to opt back into the state's opioid settlement. In 2021, the council opted out of the settlement because it was not a good deal. However, Bloomington Corporation Counsel Beth Kate presented the new settlement and recommended that Bloomington should rejoin the state's settlement.
So we are here to both present and answer any of your questions that you may have about Resolution 22-08. Just briefly, as the council may recall, at the end of last year's legislative session, the state made some legislative changes that really made it quite unfavorable for local governments to participate in the opioid settlement that the state was developing, and the level of participation monetarily for local governments was quite low. It would have barred us from participating in further settlements and so on. In this legislative session, the state legislature has changed that. They passed a law that has amended 4/16/15. Sorry, my eyesight is so bad right now. I'm looking down at my own writing and trying to make it out. But the upshot of it is that they have really solved the problems with the prior legislation, and the current level of participation for local governments in the state settlement is 50% of the recovery. And that is divided up into a 15% fund, which in the legislation talks about it being for unrestricted use. I'll say a little bit more about that in a second, and John may have some comments on that as well. And then 35% being targeted for best practices, opioid treatment and care and prevention programs.
She said that the funds would be paid out over a number of years and that the settlement is a good deal.
The proceeds from the settlement distribution are going to be paid out on a schedule, with the first payment, we believe, being made in April. The legislation gives cities until July 15th to opt back into the settlement, but because of the anticipated April distribution, we are recommending that the city go ahead. This is a good deal. It is very good, actually, and it is better than we believe the city will be able to do on its own. So we recommend that the city do, in fact, and the council approve the resolution so that the city can opt back in to the settlement and participate in that April distribution.
The council voted unanimously to approve rejoining the settlement. The City Council will have a committee of the whole meeting on March 30th, where they will further discuss the Johnson Creamery site. And we'll have more CATSweek after this message.
I'm at risk of thinking there's just no point in trying. I'm at risk of looking in the mirror and hating what I see.
I'm at risk of regretting what I do, just to join the crowd.
I'm at risk of being told not to tell. And you would never know it by looking at me.
But with Girls Inc. in my corner,
There for me, every day.
Welcome back to CATSweek. On March 23rd at the Monroe County Public Library Board of Trustees meeting, Associate Director Greer Carson gave an update on the construction progress for the new Southwest branch.
So it really is kind of the perfect site for our third MCPL library, and we're reminded of that every time we go out there. But of course, perfection can be costly. So let's talk about change order for tonight.
Carson said that the cost of the rock excavation was significantly higher than had been anticipated. Although the rock excavation exceeded the budget, Carson said that the overall project's budget had enough set aside to handle the difference.
So the actual rock removal was 1,389 cubic yards for a total of $342,510. After our $49,000 allowance, that's a $293,510 cost for rock removal. So there are two important questions we've been asking ourselves. Number one, how can or does this happen? When a thorough boring and subsurface report suggests that there won't be as much rock beneath the surface. Well, this kind of gets into the nature of doing construction in a karst topography kind of area. So if you look at page 168 in the packet, there's a useful and pretty simple visual that shows how test borings are really just approximations as to rock's density and therefore not wholly accurate indicators. Number two, what could we have done differently to avoid this scenario? Well, there are a couple of things maybe we could have done. Number one, we could have asked for additional test borings following the original Alton-Witzig report, but that report showed no real indication that that would be warranted, and so at the time I think that would have been unreasonable. And number two, we could have requested what's known as unclassified bids for the soil excavation as part of our final RFP for construction. This is where you would effectively tell bidders that anything you find under the soil is your cost, not ours. And some larger entities, including folks like IU who do this kind of construction, will do that because they can afford to have higher bids come in. That was unrealistic for us given our construction budget. So how will this impact the overall construction budget? If you look at page 13 of the packet, you'll see that we are actually in a strong position to absorb this increased cost in rock excavation.
Carson said that moving forward, if prices of supplies continue to increase due to inflation, they might have to make some cuts, but so far they are on track to continue without any changes. Board member Jamie Burkhart asked if they could repurpose the rock that has been excavated to use as natural outdoor seating.
So as I was looking through the packet, and it's hard to tell scale, right? But I'm assuming, some of these are very large. Mm-hmm. Is it possible that we could use those and repurpose those for natural seating areas on the property?
Strausser Construction's building operations manager, Ryan Strausser, replied, saying that the rocks have already been removed.
Yeah, rock removal kind of in this area, I guess when you think about digging, think of a excavator, backhoe, something like that with a bucket on it that basically you can scoop, come through, production, turn, put it in a truck. Rock, you try to excavate the bucket, it basically is just going to hit it and just do nothing. So then at that point, you have to hook a hammer up, a big hydraulic hammer, to the equipment, and you sit there and just kind of painstakingly chip on the rock until it fractures off in pieces that are manageable to then load and haul off site.
Board Secretary Kari Essery asked if they found any signs of potential sinkholes forming in the future. Strausser said that they hired Patriot Engineering to evaluate the surface conditions to ensure the library will have a stable foundation, and they did not find anything concerning. At the Monroe County Commissioners meeting on March 23rd, Health Department Director Penny Caudill gave an update on Monroe County's COVID-19 status. She said that Monroe County is in the blue advisory category.
Our 2-score metric and our advisory level both remain in blue this week on that Indiana Department of Health map. And we have been told, I think I mentioned this earlier, that that map would go away, and we have been told this is the last week we will see it. The nice thing about it, it is almost all blue. So there are a few counties that are yellow and just barely outside of that blue. So that is good news for the state. Our CDC community level does remain low, and Indiana only has 3 counties that are at a medium level at this time, and they too are very close to meeting that low level. The recommendations for areas with a low community level are simply to stay up to date on your vaccines and get tested for COVID-19 if you have any symptoms. If you are in that medium level, those 2 things remain the same. And then we simply add that if you are at high risk for severe illness, that you talk with your healthcare provider to determine if you need to wear a mask when you're in public or around others, or if you need to take other precautions. Masks are still currently required on public transportation per federal order, and businesses may still require them. So stay attuned when you're out and about. I would keep that mask handy just in case you need it. COVID-19 is circulating, although still remaining at lower levels. We expect to see some increase in cases after the breaks that we've had, some events that may be occurring, but we're not at this time expecting any big surges. In terms of BA.2 variant, it is circulating. New accounts for the estimation are that across the nation, we are at about 35% are the BA.2 variant. While it is more transmissible, we are not seeing a lot more hospitalizations, severe illness, or deaths at this time. So that's good news. And the vaccine does remain a good tool for all of the variants that are circulating at this time. Our hospitalizations continue to drop. And so the numbers and the data is supporting that we are at a low community level. And while the virus is still circulating, we're not out of the woods as far as that goes. It is still good news.
Cottle also shared that the gravity testing site will be closed during the month of April.
The gravity site off Curry Pike is still open through April 1st. And I mentioned before that all of those gravity sites will be closing during the month of April. I would encourage anyone who has traveled for spring break, anyone who is concerned that they may have been a close contact, somebody certainly with symptoms should take advantage of testing that is available. And the gravity site is free. It's a PCR test. It is not a rapid antigen test.
Next, Assistant Chief Probation Officer Troy Hatfield asked the commissioners to approve a grant received by the Probation Department and Indiana University. The grant would be used to fund research into decreasing the chances of a client breaking parole and, in turn, reducing the amount of time someone will spend in prison.
So since 2019, we've been involved with this project through IU Bloomington, IUPY, George Mason, with some researchers from those institutions, including George Mason. And what it is the first phase of the project, the research group received a grant from Arnold Ventures Foundation to really kind of look at and examine the pathways that some of our clients take, our adult probation clients take, that might lead them on the path towards having a revoked sentence, where they might have to, probation wasn't successful and they might have had to then spend time in jail or prison as a result. So that first phase basically looked, what are some of those common pathways that people follow that have that sort of outcome? Now that we've kind of moved through that first phase and we've learned a lot about whether it's characteristics or some of the issues that come up during supervision, we're moving into phase 2. And we are one of just 5 jurisdictions out of the original 10 that are funded for phase 2, so that we can put together some strategies that will hopefully disrupt some of those pathways and create greater success for the clients that we have under supervision. So there are fewer days in jail and fewer people as a result also going into prison.
The Probation Department is receiving $170,000 in total grant funding provided by Arnold Ventures. Hatfield said that the grant completely funds the program.
That would allow us to accept $170,000 in funding from that project to put forth towards training our staff into some new strategies that we can put in place to help bring our clients a little bit greater success during their supervision. Just to kind of give a little bit more on this project, overall, there were 10 jurisdictions funded for phase 1, and we're pretty small jurisdiction for some of the people that were funded. We're talking about like Cook County, Chicago, Chicago, Illinois, Harris County, Houston, Texas, Denver, Colorado, and then, just little all us in Monroe County, Indiana, in the Midwest. And just out of those 10, we're just 5 that were selected to move forward with the phase 2 strategies. So, I'm really proud of the project and what we're doing and what we're trying to do for our clients to bring about some greater success. And we're very hopeful that the commissioners will support us in these efforts as well.
The commissioners approved the grant unanimously. And we'll have more CATSweek after this message.
For hurting families in Monroe County.
A contribution to children who are vulnerable and in need of an advocate.
A staff that goes above and beyond to support and advocate for children in need of services.
The web of remarkable people who are dealing with difficult situations.
So many young people that are in need of help and trying to find a stable family, a stable place to live. Without the CASAs to make that happen, many of them would be unable to find a good home.
I love being that voice for the child who can't speak for themselves in court.
It takes me out of my comfort zone, and it also helps others.
CASA means supporting our community.
Being a CASA is making sure that your village is healthy and whole, and that the children in your village will someday be able to help the village as well.
A child who doesn't have a voice, maybe in their family situation or a school situation, now has a voice that can advocate for them.
I really enjoy working with children that are going through difficult times and letting them know that I care about their future.
We are privileged with our charge of representing the best interest of children. And so therefore we can advocate for exactly what they need without restriction, focusing on their best interest.
I want to repair the world one child at a time.
Welcome back to CATSweek. At the Richland Bean Blossom School Board meeting on March 21st, Assistant Superintendent Matt Irwin asked the board to approve a grant called the Build, Learn, Grow Child Care Stabilization Grant. He said the Family and Social Services Administration awarded the RBB School District a $131,000 grant that they intend to use to install an outdoor playground at the preschool.
Yeah, so this is another grant that Matt Wooten was able to secure. It's from the fall of 2021, the Family and Social Services Administration, the FSSA, which is the Office of Early Childhood and Out-of-School Learning, awarded RBB a little over $131,000 as a part of this grant. We plan to use this grant under the area of facility fees, maintenance, and improvements category. With specifically looking at the outdoor play space for the new preschool addition. So we're really excited about just building up that area for that play space that will hopefully include an outdoor classroom, pour-in-place, playground equipment, a bike walkway pathway for our students to get out and move. It's going to be a really nice area for just another added space that our students and staff will be able to use. I'm also hoping that here in a month or two, we possibly could be coming back with a second round of this. There's a second round of the funding that Mr. Wooden is looking into, so hopefully we'll be able to get that. Playgrounds are not very cheap, and so we're really excited about these funds to be able to really improve a nice space for our kids and our staff. So with that, I ask for your approval of that grant, please.
Board President Dana Kerr commented that the staff's ability to find and apply for grants is important to help fund special expenses.
I think our team does a really good job of seeking out grants and keeping their eyes and ears open, and so I appreciate that because they do help us with especially with the special things.
Yes.
So we appreciate them.
At the Bloomington Redevelopment Commission meeting on March 21st, the Commission discussed a contract with Access Architecture for design work on the new Trades District Technology Center. Director of Economic and Sustainable Development, Alex Crowley, provided the Commission with background knowledge on the agreement.
So all of you know, I believe already, that Access Architecture has been working with the city and the team for the EDA grant, which is the Trades District Technology Center. They've been working with us now almost a year, I think. And so what this agreement does is it really just kind of locks in and formalizes the fees and responsibilities that they have for the project moving forward. You'll see in the resolution, we had very thorough vetting process at the time that we were beginning the work to get the grant, to pursue the grant. The grant was awarded. Access did a lot of work, both in helping us to put together the grant, but then also to redesign. If you remember, we had to kind of downsize the building a little bit based on available funding. So they've been very involved in the whole process. And essentially, this is setting up for what we hope is really the meat of all of this, which is the process of completing finalized designs, costing all of that out, going to bid, and then ultimately building the building. This is in line with the presentation and proposal they've given us originally. You'll see that really on the fee structure, we're trying to be as detailed as possible. One of the issues that everybody should be aware of is that the cost estimate that was put together at the time that we submitted for the grant has changed based on construction costs and supply chain issues. So one of the things we wanted to do is reflect in the agreement that even if construction costs are going up, because fees like this typically are a percentage of construction costs, we wanted to lock it in at the amount that was originally conceived, because in our opinion, the design fees shouldn't increase if construction costs increases. There's no material change in the effort necessary. It's just the underlying cost structure. So you'll see that that's why it was reflected that way in the agreement. So you'll see it's a percentage against the original construction cost plus some lead consulting and design work that has to be done to meet the city's ordinance.
In response to a question about the timeline, Crowley said that there will be a gap in funding that the Commission should prepare for due to increasing prices for construction work and materials.
From a timing perspective, things are, on track. We are trying to get, so they have presented us some schematic design, updates and costs associated with that. Obviously, we have to go to the final kind of cost estimating and then bidding process. So that's ahead of us still. I would like to reiterate, and I think I've mentioned this before to the RDC, but just to reiterate that there will be a gap between the original estimate of costs and what actual costs will likely come in at. That gap can only be filled with incremental funding. Obviously, the alternative would be to further downsize the building to try to fit it into that construction cost estimate. But having done that once already, we feel like really the only option would be to fill that gap with additional funding. And we are starting to look at what options may exist for that. We certainly believe that we have put ample local funding on the table. So it's really looking for sources beyond local public funding to cover any kind of gap that might come out.
The resolution passed unanimously. The commissioners also discussed the redevelopment of the old hospital site. Commission member Randy Cassidy proposed extending a contract with J.S. Held to find adequate developers for the Hopewell neighborhood.
As you all know, we've been using, originally, actually, they were Core Planning Strategies has been our consultant. They were a consultant for the parking garages, but we also hired them to help us out on the Hopewell site, the legacy hospital site. And they were acquired and they changed their name to JS Held. And so we want to continue using them. They've been fantastic for us, but we wanted to extend their contract through 2022, because as you know, this is the time that the Hopewell site's kind of heating up, and those kind of services are vital to keeping on task and keeping on timeline for that project. So what this addendum does is essentially extends that contract through the end of 2022, and it would cost us an additional $250,000 for those services for 2022, which would be bring the grand total not to exceed amount of their contract to $367,342.
The commission voted unanimously to extend the contract with J.S. Held. And that is all for CATSweek. Thank you for joining us. For CATS and WFHB, I'm Annalise Poorman.